Hello and welcome, folks, to another edition of RSF Radio. I am your host, Joe Monday, and I have a very special guest, a very prominent guest in the community. You have probably seen him on a number of streams. He does all the games. He, as far as I know, I think you have commentated almost every of the most popular games, and I have certainly you are someone in the community who I have looked up to, learned a lot from. In terms of presentation of tech and just in general a long-standing member of the community. I have UltraDavid on the show today. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's been one of those guests who I've wanted to have on the show for a long time, but didn't necessarily have a reason to do so. But I think today the stars have aligned in a way that I think it makes perfect sense, because not only well, the main reason I want to have you on the show is that I had a listener email in and ask, well, what about legal stuff? And we'll get to that question in a minute. But also, I mean, I thought, of course, UltraDavid, the FGC lawyer. But also, you have an article on Top Tier that has just come out. And I feel like those two things kind of mixed together, and I think it's a good time to pitch whatever you got going on. But before we get into any of that, before we talk about the legal stuff, what do you have going on? Because every time I have a guest on the show, I have to ask, I have to let you have your time to pitch whatever you have going on, because people don't listen to the very end of the show. They're only going to listen to the beginning. So if you have anything that you want to shill right now, please do so.
Well, my legal website is dpgatlaw.com. I specialize in contracts and various transactional law, mostly with respect to like video games and entertainment and pro gaming, or esports, as they say, and various other stuff too, IP. And also, you can watch me on twitch.tv/UltraChenTV and also youtube.com/UltraChenTV, which James and I have actually been doing stuff on this year. And I hope that's been cool. But yeah, we've actually been using that.
Yeah, it's like funny that you've been like pretty regular with it this year.
Yeah,
it's been something that's been around for a long time, but it seems like the both of you are like, wait a minute, is this the year? And it kind of just has been pretty steady on the content.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's on both of us for sure. That was not commonly done, but
Schedules are hard, man. It's a fucking nightmare. I understand it.
I mean, it's not so onerous. We should have been doing it the whole time, but things get in the way, or one of us isn't feeling well, or whatever it is. So yeah, for now, we're definitely trying to make it happen.
All right, no, that's cool. What's your schedule like for Ultra Chin?
Well, on the Twitch stream, we stream almost every Tuesday evening, Pacific time. That hasn't been the case over the last couple of weeks just due to other circumstances, but almost always that's when we do it. I think we've hit something like 45 or 46 weekends out of the year, or weeks out of the year, each of the past, half dozen years. So we're pretty consistent. And I stream on it myself in the morning Pacific time. So I typically do that 2 or 3 times a week.
Cool.
And then on YouTube, we try to upload. We'll upload the Tuesday show on Wednesdays typically now,
right? And
we try to upload at least 1 or 2 other things during the rest of the week.
Yeah, no, it's been a good stream of hashtag content for quite a while now.
Thanks, man.
Definitely worth a follow if you haven't already. But anyway, let's get down to business. Before we get into business, I should say a little legal disclaimer here. Don't take legal advice from a podcast. Don't do it. I think legally I have to say that, and also that's just generally don't do it. So whatever we talk about here in audio format, this is not a signed contract. This is not. No one is your lawyer.
Right.
You can't. This will not hold up in court. I'm fairly certain. Has there been any podcast law of like? Has anyone brought up podcasts in a court case? I wonder.
I mean, I'm sure that's happened in some court case, but if you mean like has a legal podcast ever been, sued because somebody thought that they were giving out legal advice? I don't know that that's happened for podcasts, but I mean, maybe, but the law is definitely settled on that. And it's, there were lawsuits about that with respect to radio shows, a century ago.
Yeah. The FCC has that pretty tightly locked. There are the laws around radio, and the things that you like can and cannot do are kind of buck wild.
And even on top of that, each state has its own set of rules with respect to lawyers, and they typically prohibit lots of things. It's a very, very tightly regulated profession.
All right, but we're not here to talk about podcast law. I'm not in any legal trouble that I know of, but a listener wrote in, and I'm going to read this question verbatim. I think it's a good question, something that I think... It's one of those things where I read this question and I was like, yeah, like this shit's been going on for like the last decade, if not longer than that, of bad shit happening within the community. And it's high time that someone set the record straight and let the people know what's good and what's bad out there. But let me read the question. This is Ryan who wrote in and asks, what are some major red flags that a player should know when searching for an esports team? That's the bare question. And I think that there's a lot to branch off of from that, because I've seen a lot of David, the brand of esports organization that pops up out of nowhere, you've never heard of them, and they present you a contract?
I do. I do know that.
What's that contract look like?
It looks much better now than it ever did before. There's definitely been a substantial improvement.
For sure.
Substantial improvement. I mean, when I first began doing this in 2011, there was no esports law. I mean, I think that I was probably the first or one of just a couple people who were doing any kind of a practice in esports at all. None of us even called it that at the time. So, I mean, the contracts involved were, if they existed at all, they were a couple of pages, and there were misspellings, and there was missing a lot of important stuff. It's not like that anymore. That's not true. Actually, the worst contract I've ever seen, I saw last year. So
okay.
It's not, I mean, it still exists, I guess, but it's so much less. It's so much better than it ever was.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, still, if an organization pops up you never heard of, and they offer you a contract, I mean, right away, that is a red flag. That's something that you need to know. I mean, what I'm going to mostly answer with here is just common sense. It's not, certainly there's a lot of stuff in the law that requires specific knowledge, but in terms of finding a set of red flags, I really think that that's mostly stuff people can figure out.
But so David, there's so much legalese. How do I even parse this?
When it comes to the contract itself, that is true. I mean, for sure. And you should absolutely have a lawyer review it. But so if you're not understanding the actual text, definitely have a lawyer review it. I mean, have one review it anyway. But the red flags are things that are going to be common sense. Have you ever heard of these people before? No? Well, that's weird. Do you know anybody who has, if they have existed, has been with them and has had problems? Well, okay, that's maybe think about that twice. Have you heard about them ever not paying? Have you looked through the contract, and does the contract say that they get a huge percentage of your winnings? I mean, it's most of the things I think really are pretty clear. And rare nowadays that you come across things that are obviously bad, right. But it definitely still does exist. It's just that much of it is going to be stuff that should definitely already create red flags in your mind. Yeah,
I think that's pretty sensible. Like, I've had people even ask me of. And I'm not like an esports organization guy. I don't know many of these pop-ups, but I don't necessarily know the legalese myself. I really only know it through having to interact with it on the rare occasion that I do. But seeing people have asked me, and it's like, well, I've never heard of these people, so let's Google who owns this company. Like, where did they even come? How many followers they got on Twitter.com?
Sure.
Like, how long have they been on Twitter.com?
Totally.
How long?
I mean,
like,
no, these are things that I've looked up for sure. I mean, that's all very commonsensical stuff. If they have no followers at all, that's not to say that they can't be legit, but if they have a lot, they've probably been around, they've probably been doing stuff, they're probably not brand new.
Yeah, because that brings up a good point of, gosh, now I'm going to forget the name of it. What was the name of that esports organization they have ties to? Is it Cinemark Theaters?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Oh, fuck. Hold on. I'm going to search them real quick. It's like Super Esports. Super League Gaming. Okay. So they signed like a pretty like interesting, I forget the exact deal it was. It was a couple like months ago, but they partner with Cinemark Theaters, and they're like, we're going to have like a whole league, and like Street Fighter and Capcom is going to be part of that. But they've only got like 600 followers on Twitter, and it would, if you were to look at it, you'd be like, this is whack. But like, the owner is the former head of, I think it was former PR for BP, which is like, okay, there's some.
That's pretty wild.
What the fuck's going on here? Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, so it's not to say that if an org doesn't have, many followers, that they're not going to be legit. In that case, I don't know either way. But that's something to at least look into. So a lot of the initial things you should be doing if you're approached by a team, or if you get a contract, however it comes from a team, it's just like basic, check them out. If they are brand new, then you do have to do, I think, the things that you were talking about, where you Google them, who's involved, are they credible people, ask around in among other players or other people in the industry, or maybe find a lawyer or agent or something who knows a little bit more. If they have been around, then check them out by asking other players whether they've had a good time or not. I mean, in my experience, that's been the best way to figure out which organizations are hucksters or not, is by just asking the people who've been involved, and not always players. I've found, basically people who were previously with them in whatever capacity to be useful. So like a manager, or somebody who did graphics work for them, or somebody who did videography for them, whatever it is, that those people can kind of clue you into whether the organization is legit, or whether they have problems, among other things, paying or living up to obligations, like sending you around to tournaments, whatever it may be, helping you in social media. If the players have had an experience, or other people in the org have had an experience where they haven't been, where the org has not been, up to all of its obligations, then that's really important to know. And you definitely want to find that out before you sign a contract with them. If instead they have glowing things to say, then that's great. So I really think that those are the two like initial things to do. Definitely get the contract looked at by an attorney after that. Preferably somebody who works in esports or entertainment, or somebody who reviews contracts. There's a lot of different kinds of lawyers. So I'm not the kind of lawyer who goes to court. I've never been in a criminal case, nothing like that. I basically sit in my office and look at paperwork and write contracts or read contracts. It's a very different kind of lawyer. And I specifically do that for entertainment and video games and pro gaming and intellectual property and that kind of stuff. So my expertise is different than if I were a real estate lawyer, or if I were involved in, mergers and acquisitions. There's some big businesses. There's a lot of different expertises. So find the kind of lawyer who will know something about contracts, especially with respect to entertainment. And then, you can kind of get a better idea of the smaller things that you should be looking for when it comes to an esports contract. So one thing that jumps out to me oftentimes is the intellectual property agreement. This is something that's very common in esports player agreements. Very commonly organizations will want to get your rights with respect to, your face, your likeness, your gamer tag, whatever, that kind of stuff, so that they can use you in advertising, which makes sense.
Right.
But make sure that when they do that you're not giving them your rights forever. Oftentimes the language will be something like perpetually or in perpetuity. That's not great, because that means that then they can continue to use your face even after you leave the team. And that sucks, just out of principle. But then in terms of the actual value to you as a player, your value to another team in the future is going to be less, because that is to say, the original organization can still use you in advertising and marketing in a way that may cause other people to think that you're still with that team, right, even though you've moved on. And so the new team that you have may have to do things like bargain for the exclusive rights from the original team, or they may have to just put up with the fact that the original team is still putting up ads of you. And that way you're not going to be quite as valuable to them. They have to go through some hoops, or they're just going to be kind of screwed. So really make sure that IP agreement is not forever, that it doesn't apply always, that it doesn't apply in sort of in perpetuity after the contract is over.
It's going to hurt your value as a player at that point.
It definitely would. It definitely does. And it's not just theoretical. I mean, I know cases of players who I think it's League of Legends, signed an agreement very early in League. I think it was season 2 or 3. I mean, early times for that. Mm-hmm. And at the time, it was much smaller, of course. So the players were, not getting paid anything like they can be now. And this player signed away their rights entirely to their likeness, to their, the gamer tag, whatever it is. And that has meant that in all the years since, they have been less valuable to other teams, because what the teams have ended up doing is just bargaining with the original team to get the exclusive rights. Damn. But that sucks, because that takes time and money. Yeah. And that is going to mean that they must really want you as a player to get that. Right. And they're not going to give you as much, because they had to spend some of it doing other stuff. Yeah. That
just makes perfect sense.
Something to keep your eye on. Yeah. Huh. Another thing you really want to look at is just, and this is a general contract rule, is know exactly what the obligations are. What do you have to do in the contract? Are you there to just compete in your video game? Or do you have to tweet? Do you have to post on Facebook about the team, or you're going to a tournament? Yeah. Do you have to make video content? Do you have to stream? Some contracts I see now, in fact, this is quite common, require that players stream X amount of hours per week. And for some players, that's fine. I mean, in fact, it can be nice, right? It sort of forces you to create your own stream. Some teams help you out with the publicizing your stream. That's cool. But for some players who have full-time jobs, that may not be practical. Mm-hmm. It may be something that you don't want. So know exactly what is required of you. Do you have to go to other events to help publicize them? Do you have to go to a convention with them, for example, and be the dude at the booth? Know all that stuff. And same thing for the team. What does the team have to do? Yeah. Is the team just going to be paying for you to go to an event? Do they have to pay for you to go to an event at all? Do they have to pay for you to go to specific events, or is that kind of nebulous? You want as much specificity as you possibly can get, because the more specificity that is going to be that's there, the sort of better your relationship is going to be with the team. I mean, what a contract is a description of the business relationship. And it can go badly. I mean, the fact that you have a contract doesn't mean it's all going to work out. But if it's more precise, if it's more specific, then you can better know what their relationship should be, what they should be doing for you and what you should be doing for them, in a way that would cause less argument, less friction, right? Being upfront is just going to be helpful.
Knowing what's in the contract gives you leverage when you have that conversation of saying, well, it says here that you are obligated to send me to X amount of, this is what you are liable for in the situation.
Exactly right. So sometimes I've had players who, come to me, they're upset that the team has not been sending them around to as many events as they had hoped. But looking at the contract, What it says in reality is that the team can send them to tournaments, may send them to tournaments,
Right.
but isn't obligated to. And even if it is, even if there's some language that's like, yeah, the team has to send you to tournaments. Well, which ones? Does it have to send you to your local? Is that it? Or do they have to spend $2,000 to send you to a tournament in Europe or in Australia or whatever? I mean, it has to be specific.
Yeah, if the
so that you
language
can
is-
make sure
yeah.
that you don't have any kind of quibbles about what the meaning is.
Yeah. When the language is vague, it can be exploited in that way. Or another thing about, you mentioned like content creation or like making videos, is who owns that after that? Do you own it? Do they own it? I feel like some of that matters.
It definitely matters, yeah, and it's two different questions as well. Who owns the video that's created is different than who owns the channel. So, do you own your own Twitch stream, or do you just own, the footage that you put out on it? But they can take your channel away at any time, or is it the opposite, right?
Yeah,
well,
it's
yeah,
weird
I mean,
how you
that's
can
something
sign
to-
away in a contract of like, oh, this channel that I've been creating is now like, it's just been
I mean,
like
arguably, you
Shanghaied
can.
almost.
Like maybe you can't based on Twitch TOS terms of service, but maybe you can. And why bother getting that controversy involved at all?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Why bother with that?
No, yeah, just be specific. So if the contract seems like it's being weaselly, this is going to be something that, of course, is easier for a lawyer to figure out. But you can definitely read it through. And if it seems like it's not being specific, then that is a red flag. It may not mean that the team has bad intentions. It may just mean that they didn't think that they needed to be as specific in a certain situation. Maybe they certainly have the intention to send you around wherever you want, but it's going to be better if that's in the contract, because that will make it clear to absolutely everybody that there's no bones about it, that they definitely have to. So, doesn't mean that the team's bad if they don't have that stuff, but where I do become concerned is if you bring it up saying, I'd like more specificity, and they say, we don't think we need that. I begin to get a little worried when that happens, and that has happened.
Right. The pushback from the owners. I just want to say something that has helped me folks who have listened to this show know this for a fact, but I'm a dummy. I'm a dullard. I'm an idiot. But me, as an idiot, have learned a little bit of a way around a contract, and I found what helps me, and something that I've found to be important in contracts that I have read, is reading the definitions. They're usually at the end of the document, but or are they in the beginning?
Yeah, they're typically in the beginning. That's
in the
where
beginning. Okay, and then things can be defined later on. Anyway,
yeah.
Point is that when the language of the contract reads like a player or mentions something that you're like, that sounds vague, it might have been defined earlier in the contract. So it's
right.
That's one way around reading legal documents that I'm like, oh, okay, I get this now.
Yeah, you definitely have to pay attention to what things mean. I mean, for sure, and that's not to be pithy about it, but yeah, you have to know a lot of that stuff, and that's why lawyer is a profession. A lot of the words that are in contracts have specific legal meaning,
right.
Even if they seem like they can just be used colloquially. If there's some regular word, but
right.
in the specific context of a contract in a specific location, it can mean its own thing. So a lot of my training is in just figuring that stuff out. It's not rocket science. It's just that you have to spend some time to figure out what those words mean.
Yeah, I mean, earlier on you brought up perpetuity. I think that's one that is stand out, because it's well, who uses that normally? Well, it has a very specific meaning in legal documents. Just that kind of stuff that is stand out. But anyway, that's my dullard's advice to looking at a contract.
Totally. Yeah, you definitely got to know. Definitely got to know. So I would say that another very important thing to look at in the contract is all to do with payment. And it's not good enough to know what dollar amount you're supposed to get paid. If there is going to be a salary, or if there's going to be a stipend or whatever, that's got to be in there, of course. But on top of that, what are the conditions that have to be there for them to give you the money? Do you have to send them an invoice? Are they just going to send it to you? Do you have to send them receipts if there's going to be a tournament stipend or something? Like, that is to say, are they going to pay for your meals at a tournament? Are they going to pay for your hotel? Are they going to pay for your flight or bus or whatever it is? Or are they going to require you to pay for those things in advance and then you get reimbursed, which sucks, because that means that you have debt on yourself in the meantime.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
So
you don't want to carry that.
Be willing to hold on however much. Yeah. So that's one thing to know. And then even on top of that, how are they paying? Is it going to be via check, or do they prefer PayPal? If it's PayPal, you got to make sure that it's not going to be the kind that means that you lose money, which I think is business transactions. Yeah. Like PayPal takes a cut for that. That shouldn't be happening, right? You shouldn't have to give up some cut for that. Or is it check, and do you have a checking account, or is it cash or whatever? I mean, these are things that you have to look into. What's the payment schedule? So sometimes if you have a reimbursement, for example, that may have to be done, the reimbursement, within a couple of weeks. But sometimes they have 2 months to reimburse you. Sometimes they have 3 months, that's rare, but that I've seen that, 90 days. These are all good things to know because, again, you just have to be super specific with all of the obligations in here. If you put in something for a reimbursement and you're expecting to get paid within a few days, if they have 90 days to do it, they're not going to do it instantly.
Right.
And you have to know that. You have to have the expectation that that's what is going to be there. If they don't have all these details and they are kind of hesitant about being specific, then to me that's a concern.
Right, because they're not your friend that owes you money. It is a company that is legally obligated to pay you money at a pre-agreed upon time frame, right? Mm-hmm. That is what it is. Even though the person that you're talking to might seem like your friend because they might seem like a member of the community, right? They might be someone from the community, and they could talk in a way that is very friendly, but at the same time, they don't exactly owe you right now because of the document. Something else that I think is important, looking into what companies has this esports organization partnered with, and what are you or are you not allowed to, I guess, what products do you have to use? Mm-hmm. I feel like that one is something that has caught people up in the past of man, I'm locked into using this stick, and I kind of want to try a hitbox right now, or I kind of want to try this other stick, but I'm kind of stuck with this one. Are there obligations that way? Do you feel comfortable pitching those products? These are looking into something that I found useful in. I mean, we brought this up earlier, but when you research an organization and are thinking about, signing with an organization or doing business with any organization, look at who supports them. It'll usually be listed at the bottom of their website. They'll usually have that, who are our sponsors, and you can see, it's here's a G Fuel contract that they have, and do I like G Fuel? Do I like Kanba?
Right.
I don't know. These are questions that you need to ask.
Makes sense.
But
no, you're right. I mean, again, most of what I think people should look out for is the common sense stuff up front, and then make sure that you know all of the details of the obligations in the actual contract itself. Those are definitely the biggest takeaways from this. Mm-hmm. To continue with the contract stuff, I guess probably the last most important thing to look at. So, talking about obligations, and then what are the payment conditions, and then termination. How does the contract end? Mm-hmm. This can be huge. Some contracts are for specific lengths of time. That's typically how it's done. 6 months. I've seen 3 months. That's on the shortest end. I've seen on the absolute longest end 3 years. Mostly it's in between. It's a year or something like that. That's, I would say, pretty standard. And what are the conditions for it ending in addition to that, like, length of time?
Right.
Can they drop you whenever? That's very common. A lot of contracts, a lot of teams have contracts that say that they can just drop a player for whatever reason. Literally, the language is like at you know,
will.
they're at will, at their convenience, with or without reasoning. You know, sometimes it's very obvious, and that's bad for you because that means that, you know, you don't have a long-term contract effectively. You could be let go at any moment. So if you are hoping to go to Evo next month and all of a sudden the team drops you today, yeah, well, you no longer can go to Evo. Maybe. I mean, that's the fact that you don't have certainty is bad news. Oftentimes these contracts will have something like, well, we can let you go whenever, but we have to give you notice, and that notice can be like 2 weeks, or it can be a month. You know, that is to say, like, they have to let you know in advance before they're going to drop you, but that's still not very long.
Right.
And you have to think about that as being what the real, like, length or the term of the contract is. It's even though it says it's a year-long contract, it's really a month, and it's month to month, and they can at any moment let you go 1 month from when they let you know. So that's something to, you know, you don't want that. Ideally, you want certainty. It's hard to get certainty, you know, to be frank. Mm-hmm. That's typically something that has to be bargained for, and, you know, the more leverage you have, the more likely you are to get it. But at a minimum, you don't want to be let go tomorrow without any notice. And ideally, you'd like there to just be, you know, some greater length of time, the best that you can get, but not zero, hopefully. In addition to that, can they let you go if you know, flout what's often called a morality clause? So a morality clause basically says that you can't do something that would fly in the face of, you know, morality or of the value of yourself to the team. So if you say something that's racist, right now everybody hates you, you're not valuable to the team anymore. They're going to drop you.
What contracts have that?
A lot. Almost every contract has that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they better.
I jest, but
yeah, there are heated gamer moments out there.
You know how it is in esports.
I do. I definitely do. Yeah. I mean, that's come up. That also is not theoretical. That's happened.
No, that's true.
I mean, I know true. I have had clients on both the team and the player side where that has come up. So that's maybe not racism specifically, but like being a jerk in whatever way.
Yeah, the way that you carry, like gosh, how's the verbiage usually? It's like carrying yourself in a manner that would disparage the name.
Yeah, right. So
that.
Like non-disparagement clause is maybe what you think of.
Yes.
That is to say that you can't do something in public or say something in public that would, you know, cast major doubt on the team, or that would make the team be viewed negatively in the public eye. Yeah, that is also pretty common. Right. So a lot of these things with respect to like morality clause and non-disparagement is just, you know, don't be a jerk. They're typically pretty easily satisfied. Right. But you will want to know that. You'll want to know that either way. Like what are the conditions where they can let you go? After the contract is supposed to end, is it over? This is pretty common. It's pretty common that there are auto renewal periods in player contracts. So it may say that it's for 1 year, but not infrequently, they'll also say, and the team can exercise an option to automatically renew the agreement for an additional year. That's up to them. Typically, they will also give the player an out, but you have to let them know like pretty far in advance, oftentimes, that you don't want to be picked up again. Like if it's a year long, typically you got to let the team know 1 month in advance, sometimes 2 months in advance, that you do not want to be renewed again. So that's something you got to look into. I mean, that's something you have to know right from the get-go. And if you think that things are not going well, then you got to let them know in advance. Another thing to look for after the contract is supposed to be over is, do they have the right of what's called first refusal? So say some other team comes to you after your contract's over. This other team would like to give you a great deal. They have better money, they have better obligations, right? Other stuff that you really prefer. Well, in the right of a first refusal kind of case, the original team can say, actually, we're going to keep you, but we'll meet the important terms of the new contract. So we'll match your new salary, we'll match the new obligations, and then they'll be able to keep you. That's, again, not uncommon. So if you don't like the team, you have to let them know, again, far in advance, that you don't want to come back. Now, you could just decide to not sign any agreement. You could just be like, I don't want to do esports anymore. You could definitely do that. But so that it's not like you're some indentured servant forever.
Right.
But you cannot sign an agreement with that new team right away if the original team wants to match the terms. And you got to know what terms they have to match. Is it just salary? Like say it's the new team is like, oh yeah, new salary. We'll send you to every single tournament. We will help your social media. We'll help your stream. All this great stuff. What part of that counts as the things that the original team has to match? Salary, almost certainly.
Right.
But what if it's not however many tournaments you're going to get sent to? What if that doesn't count? What if the stream help doesn't count? These are things that you want to know in advance also. So like what I've been saying, you just have to know as many details as you can about what the obligations are, what the relationship is between you and the other side. And, a team that has an auto renewal or right of first refusal does not mean that they're shady. In fact, that in my experience, teams that have thought about that legal side of things are probably not the shady ones. They're more typically like people who have done their homework. They kind of know what business is. But if that kind of stuff might exist and they don't want to clarify and they specifically, would rather it be kind of nebulous and unclear, then, like I've been saying, that's when I become more concerned.
Right. Something out of my own curiosity. What's your experience with contracts that have language about injury?
I think that's pretty common, especially now.
Personal injury. Let's say that I'm a player, my wrist blows up, or something happens. What are the legal obligations there?
It's pretty rare that there's going to be, some substantial legal obligation on the part of the team. Almost always, at least in fighting games, almost always players are independent contractors in the US and not employees. And they're very, very rarely given any kind of health insurance. That's definitely more common among teams that have the players listed as employees. But the teams that have players listed as employees are usually in other esports, like the League of Legends and Overwatches have to have the players as employees. That's mandated by their league structures. But nothing like that exists in fighting games.
No.
And the time obligations, to be frank, are way more onerous on League and Overwatch and other teams that have to, arrange times to practice in these team esports. Many times they're living in a certain house. They have a coach. It's just a very different situation than in a fighting game, which is a lot more, whenever kind of thing. Whenever you want to be playing is fine. So no, I think it's really rare that there is something that says that you would be covered if you have an injury. Much more common is that it specifically says that you understand when you are becoming a player with us that there is some possibility of injury, that maybe you get injured playing, maybe you get injured traveling, maybe you get injured at a venue, whatever. And if that happens, you can't sue us.
Right.
We don't have any liability as the team. I think that's a lot more common.
That's fair. Just a little curious, because I know that would, again, probably be more on the Overwatch, the PC gaming side of things, because using a mouse is murder on your hands. Humans aren't meant for mouses. It's kind of weird how that's worked out.
I have a vertical mouse that I highly recommend.
Oh, really? What's the structure of that, actually, out of curiosity?
It just puts your hand, rather than your hand being kind of flat with your palm like kind of face flat down, it just has it kind of move your wrist to 90 degrees to the outside. And that's just kind of where your hand rests, like anyway. Like it's just a comfortable spot.
Are you in like hold a glass mode?
Yeah, you're kind of holding a glass, yeah.
Okay. I think that paints a mental picture for me. As someone who is currently holding a glass.
There you go.
That's a lot more. That feels better.
That's what I got. Yeah,
Speaking of, this is kind of an aside, but ergonomically, I feel like fighting games are a lot different than other esports. You see a lot because like there's a lot more players who have longevity in this, where like the hitting buttons doesn't necessarily do a lot of physical harm to your hands. Probably more so on the joystick hand, but people are playing hitboxes now, so who gives a fuck?
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I think that it's definitely better ergonomically. But I would say that, I mean, in my own opinion, the reason for the longevity of players in the FGC is that we've just been around a lot. Like Sako is 40 or whatever,
right?
And he's about the absolute maximum oldest you can be and have grown up playing fighting games. He doesn't get any older than that. Like before, Sako just weren't fighting games.
Like fighting games didn't exist before.
They just didn't exist.
They didn't exist.
Grown up with. Yeah,
I mean seriously.
Yeah, exactly. So he's kept playing. Most people have not, right? But he and a couple other people, GamerB is like the same age. But there's nothing like that if you're like a MOBA player. MOBAs were invented 10 years ago, maybe 12.
Right.
If you grew up playing a MOBA, you just cannot have been Sako's age yet. So, I mean, I really think it's more to do with the fact that fighting games are basically on the forefront of competitive gaming.
See, I would almost make it. I mean, that's probably definitely part of it, but I think that there's also an argument. I mean, this is aside from legal conversation. This is a total aside. I digress. But I think there's a better argument to be made of the way that the decisions that are being made are much different and at a different pace than like MOBAs or any kind of like even like a first-person shooter. Like the skills that are required of you are actually physically much less, but mentally, like it's mostly a mental game at a certain point of like the physicality of your own skill. But maybe that's just my biased opinion because I don't know much about. I don't know the meta of League or Overwatch or anything like that. But
I used to play real-time strategy games really seriously, Brood War and Warcraft 3 and stuff, and I've always felt that they're pretty similar in terms of execution requirements with fighting games.
Really?
Yeah, man. In those games, you record actions per minute or APM, and the best players are getting a few hundred or so. But they count for everything. You know, every click of your mouse and every push of a button is something that's included.
Right.
And if you were to consider how many actions per minute by that metric a Marvel player has to do, I think it's like the same. I mean, you if you're in a hitbox versus a stick, it's going to be easier to find.
Right.
Each push of a button that's directional or an attack, you're absolutely constantly doing it. You're never not doing it in a game like that, whether you're moving or playing defense or playing offense or whatever it is. So, I mean, personally, I think that it's all pretty similar. But StarCraft wasn't invented until the late 90s. That's when RTS games really blew up at around the turn of the millennium. That's almost 10 years after Street Fighter 2 came out. So there's just not going to have been a Sako who grew up playing RTS and be the same age that Sako is now. I mean, maybe there will be. I expect that kind of thing to happen. But
yeah, I want to see what the market looks like in 10 years. Like, who are our old League players?
Yeah, I mean, I fully expect some players to be in their 60s and 70s and playing, just in the same way that professional musicians reach that age and surgeons reach that age. And I don't really know why, like, fighting games and MOBAs can't be like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the argument to that, and I don't necessarily follow Dota that much, but wasn't the team that won the international built of like older players?
Oh, I don't know, man.
I feel like there was a story that was like this team, they were a ragtag bunch. They were like the leftovers, and they came in. And,
oh yeah.
I don't know if it was the international. I don't know. It was some. Hey, if you're a listener to this show and you know what the fuck I'm talking about, let me know about it because it sounded like a very a story that I could relate to. Something that, I guess it's like a team that no one expected to do well because it was older players and like people who had filled in, and then they did well. Maybe there's an argument to be made for people who are into MOBAs and such, where maybe there is longevity in your career, but
yeah.
maybe they just need to make a mouse that fits for you
Yeah.
for the long term, all honesty. Anyway, big digression, but something about contracts, a word that you said about contracts that I think is important to bring up, and is something that is available to anybody, is you can talk to them, but you can change it. You can negotiate your contract.
Oh yeah. Do not view contract offers as being like just getting the text that comes up when you open a new video game, right? You have to press accept on an end user license agreement.
I read
I
read all those TOS.
I mean, I never read those things. So, it's not like that. You definitely can push back. Now, how well you can push back, of course, is closely tied to how much leverage you practically have. If you are an Evo winner and you have a big social media following and you stream a lot, and those are factors that are going to get you a lot of ability to negotiate and sort of get the deal that you want. If you don't have that stuff, maybe you could still have some leverage. But as you sort of go down, I've made a top 8 last year, that degree is going to get you less and less and less leverage. But still, almost always there's a little bit, and it's almost never been the case. I think I can think of only 2 or 3 examples counter to this where I've asked for a player to get some kind of change to their agreement and where the team just denies it. What I'm asking for is tempered by how much leverage I think that I have on behalf of the player. So I'm not asking for somebody who has never won a tournament to get what somebody who was won Evo would get, right? So I'm not kind of shooting for the moon. But in terms of asking for reasonable things, yeah, typically teams are pretty cool about that stuff. And to the extent that they push back, it's often on things where, like, I understand why they would push back. It's at least in the last, several years, it's really become like this, where the people who tend to be involved, they're like usually just trying to run a team reasonably, and typically are not trying to, fleece people or kind of steal money or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. It's become less common.
Yeah, so yeah, I feel like the paths that have been laid out are at least more obvious, where, I mean, fuck, man. Like, it's been going on forever, where there have been, how many stories have there been of, like, this esports organization that lasted for 2 years and then is gone? Mm-hmm. Like, that shit just happened. We're seeing less and less of that as time progresses, and I think that the way that teams are run, and I think from a legal sense, as you've stated, that the contracts have actually gotten a lot better, which is, I think that's great news for sure, for both the players and for the organizations that are out there, and just for, like, the community in general. I don't know, but anyway.
So I guess I would say one last thing to look out for when it comes to a contract that does kind of make me suspicious is make sure that it applies to your particular situation in terms of your game. It's pretty common still to find a contract that's built for some team esport that is given to a fighting game player, which is definitely not a team esport. And that's going to come with different stuff. So these contracts will often say things like, you have to be present for practice. You have to be available at least X or whatever amount per week so that we can get practice in. You have to listen to the coach. The management decisions are up to the team. They can bench you. These things don't mean anything in the context of a single player video game.
David, we paid our lawyer once for the template. Why would we want to pay him again for the fighting game template?
So that is exactly what's going on. And so the reason that makes me suspicious is if they don't have the money and time to make sure that they are keeping things appropriate to your particular situation, then I'm not convinced that they have the money and time to properly run a team and do all the things that they need to do to make the team successful and to make the player successful, to send the player around, to pay the player whatever salary if there is one.
To understand the community that...
Yeah, to understand the scene, right.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing. I've typically found that when I bring this up to teams that give a sort of team contract to a single game player, that they're usually pretty cool about it. And they say, oh, our bad, we didn't realize, or you're right, something like that. That's usually been my experience when it comes to, I've only a few situations where the teams have just said, yeah, it's fine, sign it anyway. And in those cases, I'm not enthused about my player signing for those.
Right. No.
Just as with all the rest of it, just make sure that the contract fits to your situation. Make sure that you get the details.
Yeah.
Make sure that there's nothing that seems like it's too unclear or nebulous, and have a lawyer check it out.
I feel like that's a good sniff test. And honestly, if you're at the level where you are approaching larger companies, it is entirely worthwhile to approach a lawyer about it as well. Have someone on your side who can speak to that language and understand it if you don't. But all right. Anyway, I think that man, we talked about law for pretty long, actually. Took up a big chunk of the show, which is fine. I mean, I think that's good information to get out there. I'm glad we did. But I do want to talk about another thing that is in your wheelhouse, commentary. And I want to bring it up because I feel like it is worthwhile to bring up Top Tier GG and what they've done as a website recently. Because if you're not familiar, we talked about them before on this show, but they run Top Tier GG runs articles, yes, but mainly it is a local weekly tracker. If you've got tournament information, you can send it to the people at Top Tier GG, and it will be on the list among other tournaments as well. But they reach out to the community and they do stuff like this. But you have recently written an article about commentary, specifically commentary across multiple games. So if you want to maybe speak to that for just a moment, maybe not summarize the article, but what was your experience in that?
So I know the guys who started Top Tier. I've known them for many, many years. There are a couple of players in SoCal who I guess aren't so much players anymore, kind of moved on from that aspect of FGC, but are definitely still around. Yeah, man. I mean, for sure. So they're definitely still around. They're trying to find some other way to help the community is essentially what it is. And, they asked me to write an article for them a while back. I was super late on delivering that, but it finally did get it out. In pure
FGC fashion, you were late.
Yeah, no doubt. I did get it out to them. I mean, I for a couple of reasons. One is that I think it's an interesting article to think about and to write. And, I really am interested in helping people learn how to commentate. And then the other one is to just get them to check out Top Tier, because I really think that they do good stuff in terms of highlighting events. And if you're somebody who, as you said, has an event, then there's a great resource there where you can kind of submit your event and get people to know about it. But if you're somebody who is trying to find an event, it's super useful as well.
Yeah, they're a great platform for that on both ends. Something that you said in the article that I'm in 100% agreement with is when you are specifically learning a game, or maybe you don't know about a game that you are in front of a microphone having to talk about, is that, and I've given this advice before, ask questions.
Yeah. You're not going to know everything. If you are commentating multiple games, it's too unrealistic hard to expect you to know all the stuff that you could if you were just concentrating on a single game's, gameplay, frame data, scene and players, all that sort of stuff. So if you are in a game where you don't feel quite as confident, then don't be afraid to ask your co-commentator questions or to ask the chat questions. If it's kind of a smaller stream, you may ask the chat. If it's a bigger stream, maybe you ask for people to get to you on Twitter, something like that. But yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions, or just to throw it out there into the void and not even specifically directed to somebody. It's okay to admit that you don't know everything. In fact, that's definitely better than to fake like you know everything and come out and say something wrong.
Yeah, you come out as a fraud.
To say something wrong is the worst. I mean, nobody wants to do that. That is embarrassing for you as the commentator, and if you do it too often, it's going to make people think less of your knowledge. It happens to all of us all the time anyway. I mean, none of us gets everything right. But if it's something that is happening too often, then people will know and they'll notice.
Yeah, if you're gonna swing for the fences, like, you should be sure of your target, because pretending that you know is people. They can sniff that out, and the internet doesn't forget. Trust me, I'm on Reddit. Yeah. That shit sticks around forever.
For sure.
But asking questions that can also create a dynamic between a co-commentator that you might not have experience commentating with. That's just another possibility or another route that you could take when being thrust in front of a microphone to talk about a game that you might not be fully aware of.
For sure. And this isn't something that I specifically addressed in the article, but another aspect of commentating multiple games is that you're going to be commentating with many different people. Mm-hmm. It's not the same person, because you're going in and out of different scenes, essentially. And that means that you have to learn how to commentate with different people. It means you have to learn how to commentate with different styles, with people who maybe prefer to do the informational role, or maybe prefer to do the excitement, or maybe they just want to do both. And, that's learning how to do that is its own skill, and is probably almost as important as the advice that I put into this article about the game itself, and knowing the scene, is knowing how to commentate with people who are different and have different styles. So, the reason I bring this up is that in mentioning this question thing, you're right that it's something that can help build a relationship with the other commentator. And that's especially true if you know that the other person does know the game really well. If you find yourself somebody who is an expert in whatever the game is, and you don't consider yourself an expert, then it's an easy way to, kind of create the role of, this person's the expert. I'm here for other things, and I know some stuff, and yada yada. But for the information, turn to this person, and that's not going to make you look like you are a worse commentator. It's just going to make the dynamic more important.
Because more often than not, there's probably someone watching that stream that has the same question as you.
Sure.
Who can't ask it in the Twitch chat because Twitch chat, it's just moving too fast or whatever, or they can't for any number of reasons. But it's these little things that you can do to make it a more enjoyable experience for everybody, and also make up for the knowledge that that you lack. But that was just one aspect of the article, and it's a good little thing, and I'll link it in the show notes for people out there. Before we end this show, though, we're getting down to it. And what I want to bring up is just kind of lightly. I don't know if we want to or have the time to really dig into this topic, but Evo numbers have been finalized. The information is out there. Hey, David. Evo's a big tournament.
Pretty big.
It's pretty big, huh? But I heard that there might be some dead games. Are there?
Oh yeah.
Are there?
I don't think so.
I don't fucking think so. Dude, look at these numbers. It's ridiculous. Holy shit, dude.
I mean, to be fair, so you're on Reddit more. I haven't seen many people actually say that something is a dead game. I've seen it in a chat in like a couple situations, and I'm not sure that they're being serious. So I don't want to give too much shrift to this thing about it being dead games, because I'm not sure that is actually out there as like a main opinion. And if it's just all us being like, oh, make sure you don't think it's dead games, then why bother?
To that end, I'll say I have seen it on the Reddit.com, because listen, man, I've seen all the crime and villainy that there is.
I bet.
It's in there. I'm looking at you, the website that we're not going to talk about that anyway. But these numbers, though, it is, to me, when I see these numbers, and I'll link this in the show notes, and you've probably seen them already, listener, but damn, dude, there's so much to be happy about. Yeah. It is, think about this, almost 3,500 people signed up for a fight to compete in one fighting game this year. Smash Ultimate bringing in the fucking buku, dude. That's, how are I'm trying to think of the logistics of running that tournament. right?
Right.
Like, how early do you start? How many setups do you have? Like that number is more like less of something to be excited about, but more of like, this is a fucking problem. Actually, how how do we move this number of people through to get to a top 8 on Sunday? Is like, that's just a logistics nightmare. But
I bet, yeah. But they did do the 5,000 plus person Street Fighter V tournament, and they made it through that.
That's true.
I mean, look, not everybody who signs up is actually going to be playing, and I don't know what percentage of the 5,000 actually ended up being there.
See,
I've heard like not actually that high.
Oh yeah, that's actually something that has been, I've seen that a lot of people saying like, oh, like Street Fighter V had 5,000 year one, and I'm like, yo, I don't know if you saw like if here's like my gut response to people who say that is like, were you at pools? That was like the easiest year to get through pools. Ever.
Exactly. Yeah. So
because you had to win one match and you were through something. I know someone who won one match and made it out of pools.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. But they do have to plan for there to be 5,000 plus people. They do, like, their plans have to, they can't say, oh, well, some percentage are not going to be there. That cannot be the plan, because that would just invite disaster. So they definitely planned for 5,000 plus people to be there. This time they have to plan for 3,500 people to be there. Will they all be there? I mean, maybe most, you know, I'm sure it was most for SF5, but was it 75% or 51%? I don't know which most, right? And in this one, it's probably going to be like towards the upper percentage.
Probably.
But still, they have some experience in doing giant tournaments. So I think it'll go fine. Each year they learn more anyway, and they have a giant space to do it in.
What was your gut response after looking at these numbers?
My first response was I was surprised that Sam Show got over MK.
Dude.
Yeah.
I am right with you on that.
Everything else made total sense. We all thought Smash would be number 1. It was going to be either SF5 or Tekken at number 2. I didn't really know which. I would have, been not surprised by either. Mm-hmm. I didn't think that. I figured that, BB Tag would be last. I figured Caliber would probably be second to last. Like, most of this, I think, is pretty believable, expected. I'm a little more surprised about Sam Show beating Mortal.
Yeah, most of this follows trends of what we've seen from prior tournaments, like on a month-to-month basis, even fucking on a week-to-week basis, based on ranking events, or even from yearly events. But Sam Show.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's awesome.
That's so many. And, like, honestly, that makes me happy because I have been enjoying that game thoroughly. I think it's a fun game to play. It's one of those things where, like, I almost remember people seeing, you're going to have Sam Show at EVO before it's even out. Like, what the fuck's that about? And it's like, well, I mean, people showed up, so obviously.
Yeah, I mean, that happens every year. That happens every single year. There's some game that's announced before it comes out. It was BB Tag last year. Mm-hmm. When BB Tag was announced for EVO, I thought that was dumb. But then the game came out, and I loved it. And it was maybe my favorite new game of 2018. I loved it. So it ended up being great. But it happens every year. Mm-hmm. Nobody made any bones about MK11 being announced, right? It was like we all knew it would be a big... Like, that's fine. That happens every single year. So for Sam Show this year, I didn't have any qualms about that it was announced before it came out.
Mm-hmm. These things are not surprising. It's just things ended up pretty positive this year. There's really nothing to be disappointed about with all of these entry numbers, and like the continued growth of like the community writ large has been, I don't know, it feels good. Like there's a lot to be like negative and sour about, I suppose. Like if you want to latch onto those things, go ahead, die in a ditch, whatever. But man, these numbers, like there's so much to be had. There's so many good games. Look at all these good games.
There are. Yeah, those are all cool. And I think it's awesome that the lowest game has 640 people, which I saw a great tweet earlier. Now I wish I would have done it, but it was comparing entrants from of these last two ranked games. BB Tag has 640. Soul Calibur has 742. In previous years, those would have been the third and fourth most entered game. And that's not like ancient history. It was like 5 or 6 years ago. They would have been third and fourth. And even the year before Street Fighter V came out, they still would have been like third and fourth. So that is awesome. Last year, Injustice 2 had like 300 something, right? So as a last place entrance game, this is great. It's the best, in fact. It's the most entries that the least entered game has had.
Yeah, like I don't know how you could look at those numbers and parse that any other way of like not just being happy that that there are a ton of really good games out there that are super healthy in terms of people showing up, and also there was a chart put out by Weed on Twitter. I've talked about him before. That's WYDD. That shows like a mesh of where all of these players have come from. And it kind of shows like with big arrows pointing back and forth between the games that they've all come from, and it's really interesting to see where like the lines are drawn. Like the arrows between Sam Show and Street Fighter are like equal in size, like going back and forth both ways. It's almost like 1-to-1, and seeing how many like little parts of each communities go to play Smash.
Right.
It's just it's an interesting little like chart to look at, to think about how, and I think this is something that the community at large need, at least if you haven't already, need to start thinking about, of how does my community interact with other communities and how can we leverage that to benefit everybody, because it's there. People don't just show up to play one game. That's fucking obvious. Like it's there in numbers. So leverage that, and I think that people can take advantage of that. But
yeah, man.
Anyway, any other thoughts before we move on?
No.
All right. Well, it has been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for coming on the show, but I cannot let you go without asking you the question that I ask everyone who has been on this show over time. The first time you're on the show, you've got to answer these two questions. Can't let you go without it. And I believe that how you answer these questions tells a lot about your personality, about who you are. It reveals your deepest, darkest secrets. And it goes as such. What is your favorite normal attack in any fighting game, and why?
Okay, it's the Dolphinator in Street Fighter 3 Third Strike.
Okay.
Hugo's Crouching Fierce.
All right. Explain why.
First of all, the name is great.
Fair.
That's the official name. That's totally in the guidebooks. It's not.
I was gonna say, I don't think it is, my guy. That's not it. I've seen that in a Game Facts, but I haven't seen that in.
Anyway, the name is excellent. It's because it is such a precise button. There's only a couple of situations in the entire game where you ever see it. It's almost always accidental.
Yeah, I was thinking to myself, that's like a mistake if I see it almost.
Yeah, almost always. Yeah. There's just a couple of characters where it's at all useful. Like one of them is Necro, who beats Hugo by playing Dalsum. It's like the one Dalsum matchup in the game where he gets to actually play a ranged game. And yet his jump-ins can lose to Dolphinator. The Dolphinator sucks, but in this one matchup, well, really a couple of situations, but mostly this one matchup, yeah, you can do Dolphinator. And it looks cool. It's horrible. I just think it's great. I love its animation.
No, that's a great answer. Like a very specific utility. Like you've got this one tool in your tool closet, right? In your toolbox where you this is the one time I use it. And that's what it is for. That's a good answer. Yeah. And you're right though. It does look hilarious. The way that he just kind of like his shape just changes into, it's very torpedo-like in nature.
Yeah.
It's great.
I would call it dolphin-like.
Sure. I suppose. Earning its namesake. All right, so part 2 of this question, off of part 1, what is your favorite combo in any fighting game?
My reaction to that is that I don't like combos. I've never played a character or game because of a combo. In fact, it's more often been the case that I think a character looks cool, but its combos are hard, so I don't want to do it, and I pick somebody else.
Okay.
It's just not a part of the fighting games that means much to me.
Sure.
But I do. The only combo situations that I like that I can think of are in Marvel 3's TAC Infinites, because some of them begin to sound very rhythmic and like they're kind of playing a song.
Yeah,
And
you're
I
not
think
the
that's
first
I think
person
that
to say
sounds
that.
cool.
Yeah.
It just sounds cool. The characters I played in that game didn't matter.
Right.
I was playing Hulk, Hagar, Thor.
Yeah, you
and
played Team Big Body.
just didn't matter. Yeah. So I never even learned them. But when I got hit by them, or if I watched, the game and watched them stream, and they had a cool sound, then at least that was cool. Or like the Chun-Li Infinite in the Air. I think that's pretty cool. Like, just because it has a cool sound. So the rhythmic quality, the sound of it, I think can be nice.
You're not the first person to answer that question like that, because I feel like fighting games in particular, specifically with long combos like that have repeated sequences, like the cadence of those sequences can be like imprinted into your brain, right? Totally. And it's stuck there forever, right? Like, I mean, when I say the Iron Man Infinite, you know exactly what, like, the sound. The sound is there. It's in your heart. You know it.
Yep.
But no, it's an interesting way to answer the question, though, that combos aren't really, because there's a part of that I would agree with. There's something to, maybe not with specifically like not combos, but like where a character does not rely on combos, or if you do get a combo, it's like a 2-hit combo that's like, damn, you see that 2 hits?
Yeah, right. Like the characters that I tend to play tend not to rely on combos very heavily. I tend to play grapplers and zoners, and they just like tend not to have big combos. But that's not accidental. Like when SF4 came out and people started doing able combos, step kick into stuff that was very tight length, I just quit playing that character forever, even though he had a command grab, and I was like, oh, this character's kind of cool. But then that happened, and I just was not interested. So yeah, that's not what I play the games for. I've come to learn about myself that I don't actually want a game that has no combos necessarily. Although I don't want a character that relies on execution. Right. But I kind of like the idea that, there's still some element where I could drop it, or where a game may have a character that's not my character that does have big execution requirements, because some people really do like it. And although that's not for me, like, I like that exists for other people.
How there can be balance between a game where it can have both types of characters, where you could be keeping someone away with errant hits for an entire match, or get in one time and kill them with one combo. And having that dynamic within one fighting game can be interesting. Cool. It can tell a good story.
I agree.
But all right. So, David, thank you very much for your time. It has been a pleasure to have you on, talking about the legal end of things. But something that is not, again, want to reiterate, this is not legal advice. Correct. Do not reference this podcast, and if you are taken to court, I will not show up.
Same. I'm not anybody's attorney unless I've signed a representation agreement with them.
Not going to be there. You can't reference us in any documentation. Please do not do so. But that is a show. Before we end it, let people know where they can find you on the internet. One more time.
Yeah. Although I'm not your lawyer from just this program, you can definitely check out my legal website, and I may become your lawyer.
You can be their lawyer. That's the thing.
It's doable. Check it out at dpgatlaw.com, dpgatlaw.com. I also do streams of various fighting games. I guess nowadays it's basically only MK11 and SF5, but Sam Show, that's true. That's at
who you playing in Sam Show? Who's your go-to?
I don't really like the game that much, but I have been playing with friends a lot, and I've been playing Tam and Alfred. Yeah, I think he fits. Like, again, as somebody who wants to do zoning and grappling, I think he makes sense. So. Anyway, so twitch.tv/UltraChenTV and youtube.com/UltraChenTV.
All right. And you can find me at Super Joe Monday or at RedditSF on Twitter.com, or just head on over to R Street Fighter and I'll find you. I'm there. That's how you hit it up. But that's a show, folks. Thank you for joining us on another episode of RSF Radio. We're here every Thursday. Don't forget about the tournaments, which are Mondays and Fridays, which we've had great attendance. If you want to talk about dead games, man, we've had so much attendance. It's been so good the last couple months or so. People are excited to play fighting games. But other than that, that's a show. We'll see you again on another edition of RSF Radio. But until then, take care, folks.